Anthony, thanks for joining me. Really appreciate you grabbing some time on what I'm sure is a busy Monday for you.
Always.
Uh,
When you're starting a
yeah,
company, for sure.
yeah, yeah, totally. And for people who don't know, and for people who are listening to this, it's probably important for them to know. Like we know each other really well. A lot of the people I have on the podcast are people I've just met or just starting to get to know, but uh, we've known each other for a little. I think it's like a little over
Yeah.
5 years,
Mhm.
and I think I know that exactly because when you first reached out to me for one of your companies that you
Mhm.
were starting, and you were looking for some marketing help, I remember I had to tell you, I was very
Yeah.
sad. I had to tell you, hey, I don't think I would be able to work with you right now because like I'm having a kid in like
Yeah.
2 weeks, and it was when our daughter was due back in June of 2020. And then it actually worked out really well that I took a little time off from work, and then when I like came back, you were kind of still interested in working together, and so we've worked together on a couple different projects, a couple different companies that you've worked on that we've kind of partnered together. So basically, the point is here, like we know each other pretty
Yeah.
well, and we work together
Yeah.
a
And it was
bunch.
great to come and meet you
Um,
and Laura and the kids too. It was just awesome, man. So thank you for the intro. But also, I also wanted to say it's been excellent working with you, and what you've actually taught me in the marketing space, and the partnership that we had for our company Granularity. It was just awesome to get to know you, get to know your family, and then you taught me a lot about marketing, the world of marketing. So thank you very much, and I really appreciate you having me on the podcast.
yeah, absolutely. And as much as you enjoyed coming up here to Chicago to kind of meet the family, I've also loved every time I've been down in Arizona, Scottsdale area,
Yeah,
visiting you. It's a great place to escape to when
not
you're
right
living here in
now.
Chicago. But
Yeah,
no,
it's
that's a
hot
good
right
point.
now,
Not
man.
in the
Yeah,
summer.
yesterday it was 116. So I've been here since 2005. It's the second time, actually. I was here, as you know, I played baseball at Arizona State. That was the first time I was here in the late
Hmm
90s, but came back in '05, and I still hate the summer. I, I still hate it. Some people say you get used to it after a while, but
Yeah.
the remaining 7 months of the year are just excellent. So
Yep.
working on getting a house
Yep.
maybe in
Um,
Sedona, or I just recently went to Napa, so I really enjoyed Napa, so maybe that's where I can live during the summer.
yeah. Yep. Well, you also have two kids, a little bit
Yeah.
older than mine, in college and in high school, and so I'm sure that probably impacts you too, kind
Oh
of at this
yeah.
point of like where you live and where they move and all that good
Yeah.
stuff. So before we go, because I want to jump into your background, because I know you pretty well, and you've got a pretty interesting story, professional, and like you said, even before kind of starting your career playing baseball. Talk about really quick, LifeSummary.ai. Give me the quick elevator pitch, what it is, and what it is that you're
Yeah.
building
Yeah.
today.
So basically, what I wanted to do is create Life Summary to provide a little more clarity and understandability to people's lives with documents that we have laying around their house already. We have insurance documents, loan agreements, all these documents in the form of, some are in paper, some are PDF, some are in email, some are in, our safe, some are in, file cabinets. But right now, they're not really helping us. We need those documents, and that's why we save them, right? But at the same token, what are we doing with them? And by using generative I think it's a good opportunity to to use that type of technology to take those documents, and when put together and relationships are drawn between those types of documents, it can bring a little more clarity to your life, in the form, and what our system will do is provide you with recommendations and or suggestions based off of your life documents. But another thing that it'll do, it will allow you to, you know, very easily bust out your phone real quick, ask a question of your documents. So if you want to think of it as like a chat GPT before your personal documents, the data will be, the system will be trained on your information. So whenever you go to ask questions, you'll be able to instantly get an answer to what's my policy number if you're out, or what's my percentage rate on my home loan, so that you can possibly better get a better loan, interest rate,
Mm-hmm.
things of that nature. Just very helpful things that are in documents that we have at home,
Mm-hmm.
but we're making that information readily available.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So it basically uses AI to take a very holistic look at all of your life's documents and all the information that lives in those documents, and sort of how that information might be related to each other.
Yeah,
That would probably take quite a bit of time without using kind of the
right.
power of AI and having a tool built for that, just to help you. It sounds like to help you live a more streamlined, simple life and make decisions easier and be more proactive. And so there's a whole bunch of the sort of use cases I want to get into and kind of how it works. But before we do that, let's go kind of take a step back, a couple handful of chapters, kind of in your story, because I want to talk a little bit about kind of how you got your start in tech specifically. In case it's not obvious at this point, like that is your background, tech, and
Yeah.
and many years of experience in computer programming and entrepreneurship. And so, and I think an important part of that story is that you played baseball in college, and you
Yeah.
were probably going to be very humble about this, but you were very good at baseball in college.
Yeah.
And tell me about how sort of baseball and tech and sort of how all of that stuff kind of came together to launch your career.
Luck. Luck.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I grew up in a small, city, called Sharon, Pennsylvania. It's in western Pennsylvania, right on the border of Ohio. And I played football, so I was pretty good in football. Got heavily recruited in football, but baseball was a passion of mine. And when I went to college, I was fortunate enough to be recruited by one of the best schools in the country at the time. Arizona State was, I would say the equivalent of like a LSU in football, or Alabama in football at the time. They were in and out of the College World Series pretty much every year. Some of the best talent went to the school, but it was way far away from Pennsylvania. So a lot of people where I grew up and told me that, why are you going all the way out there to play? But I wanted to challenge myself. So I bring this up because it kind of will segue into why I ended up becoming an entrepreneur in the first place. That was never the goal. My goal was to to challenge myself. Um, and at that time, baseball was the challenge. And when I got to school, I was majoring in mechanical engineering at Arizona State. Um, Ended up not getting the type of playing time that I wanted, and had the opportunity to transfer to the University of Cincinnati. That's where I ended up graduating from. Continued to play baseball there. And the reason I say it was luck that I got into technology was because of my athletic academic advisor. And to this day, I will forever thank Carol Wisman. Carol Wisman was my athletic academic advisor, and she really put me on the path to this. I had no idea what I wanted to major in when I transferred to the University of Cincinnati, but she told me, you are smart enough to do this computer science thing. And I remember I said, what is that? I had no idea what it was. I mean, the only thing I knew how to do was to turn on a computer and double click Microsoft Word and print a paper. I mean, that's pretty much, in the
Hmm.
90s. I mean, what all did you,
Hmm.
really do on a computer? So, she had the vision to say, this is where the world's going. And I think this is something that you could do. You should try computer science as a major. And, by this time I think it was almost my third year of college. So I said, I don't really know what this is, but I'll do it. I'll try it. And yeah, I mean, that's really how I got into computer science, and it was hard.
Hmm.
I it, you know, I, I couldn't wrap my head around it at first, but when it clicked, I just ran from there. And with me having the mindset that I have to challenge myself. I wanted to learn as much as I could. I wanted to become certified, so I ended up becoming certified as a Microsoft, solutions architect. I became certified as a Sun Microsystems developer. Sun Microsystems back in the day. I'm kind of dating
Hmm.
myself a little bit, but because I wanted to learn this. I wanted to become very good at something. My baseball career was starting to wind down. I did have a very good college career. I had the opportunity to sign with the Colorado Rockies out of college as a free agent, and my love just wasn't there. It just wasn't there anymore. I was starting to have this vision of what my life could be like by doing this computer stuff. You
Hmm.
know, how could I build my career? And it was a very difficult decision because at first my vision was to become a major league baseball player, and I worked tireless hours, and you go to bed dreaming of what it's going to be like to play in front of all these people and to get a hit in the World Series and all these types of things. And it's hard to take that vision and then switch it to something else. But I knew that I needed to, because I just knew that that was not no longer going to be my path to where I wanted to be professionally.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, that's in a long-winded way. I mean, that's how I got into technology in the first place. I got lucky, and it was perfect timing too.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of athletes, and we've talked about this a bunch. A lot of athletes really kind of struggle where you like spend your entire life dedicated to one,
Yeah,
to your craft, to your sport, and then all of a sudden, whether it's your choice or sometimes not your choice, if it's like an injury or something, and it's like, okay, all of a sudden now you don't have that thing. You got to
yeah,
channel that energy somewhere else. And I think a lot of athletes probably go through that on some level of when that
yeah.
happens.
I know
Uh,
a lot of them. Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
and I feel fortunate though. I feel fortunate that I didn't have that. I had something else
yeah,
that I was
to
able
channel it
to
into.
be passionate about, right?
Hmm.
And to be honest, was it the technology that I was passionate about, or was it the challenge? And it really, for me, it was the challenge.
Yeah.
It didn't come easy to me. And when I first, got into my professional career, I was a consultant, and um, I, I had no desire or even thought to become an entrepreneur. I was just really trying to become a very good consultant, learn as much as I possibly could about this tech stuff and this internet stuff, and become very good. You
Yeah.
know, um, and you know, going kind of back to sports is the reason I actually became an entrepreneur in the first place. So my coach at University of Cincinnati, he had asked me, Brian Cleary, he had asked me to create a system for them to manage their current players, former players, and recruits. At the time, they had three or maybe four distributed systems, and he had four logins, and it was just a lot of extra work. And he had asked me, "Is there some way of being able to take all this content and just put it in one system?" And I was like, yeah, I can do that for you. That's no problem. And yeah, I created it, and it was so funny because we call him BC. BC, his response was very funny. He was like, I was demoing it to him, what I created, and I created it on my off time for him, and he was like, "Ant, you created this?" Like, he was totally surprised that I was able to make something like that. And in
Hmm.
my mind, I'm like, dude, that's what I do. But
Hmm.
it's actually kind of funny. But then his next comment was the thing that catapulted me to become an entrepreneur. He said, dude, you can sell this. He was like, I know several, athletic departments that could use something like this. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, you can make some money on this. And that the light bulb came on from an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur. And same thing with computer science.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't fortunate enough to grow up in an environment where I was around people that owned things, businesses, assets, even. That's a different topic, but it's one of those things where like I just never, in my mind at the time, you had to go to Harvard or Yale or Princeton to be a business owner for some reason, and I don't know why I thought that, but
Mm-hmm.
that's what it was for me. It just wasn't something that I thought I could even do,
Mm-hmm.
but it was that challenge, right? It was
Yeah.
that. So so after I ended up, you know, taking what he had said, changing the system a little bit to make it a little more generic. I ended up selling it to a couple different athletic departments. And then 17 months later, I ended up selling the company. And I couldn't believe. I was like, man, that was pretty easy, you know, which was a gift and a curse, right?
Yeah.
It was a curse because I thought if you just build it, people are going to come,
Mm-hmm.
And I got lucky with that one. It
Yeah.
was just perfect time. This was in 2007, 2008. Perfect time. It was something that really didn't exist, content management systems for athletic departments. And, but yeah, I thought it was easy. So it kept me on that path.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same token, I ended up learning a lot more in the second company that I created.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. So the transition from the first company that probably had you really excited, like you said, like, hey, this is easy. Let's go do it again.
yeah.
So where did kind of the idea come for the second entrepreneurial sort of endeavor? The second company, kind of, where'd the idea come from, and how'd you go about building it?
Yeah. So the next one was called My Tool Bucket. So it was also content management, but for contractors like roofers, electricians, plumbers, a way of being able to allow them to, manage their customers. And it was kind of like Salesforce, which you're familiar with, but for that industry. Now you could imagine why it didn't necessarily work out.
Mm-hmm.
That industry and Salesforce just didn't meet. They're very paper based, and the user base, it just wasn't something. Technology wasn't something that they were really using at the time. Just to
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of their work. We had a couple customers use it. I had partnered with a roofer, very forward-thinking roofer, and his company used it for a long time, and but it just wasn't something that was going to scale.
Mm-hmm.
But that taught me a lot about how to build a company, what to look for, from a marketing standpoint, from a user base standpoint, how to understand your users before you start to build things. I just went and built the whole system
Mm-hmm.
and just was like, here you go, contractors. And
Mm-hmm.
that's, something that you definitely never want to do. But a lot of that was because I just didn't know or understand the market, just didn't really understand how to be a true tech entrepreneur at the time. So that was a major learning, curve for me. And, I had to figure out why it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And, that took some time, a lot of education, ChatGPT, AI, things like that wasn't out at the time. So you really had to, just read as much as you possibly could, buy as many books as you possibly could,
Mm-hmm.
go to as many networking events, talk to as many people to learn. And,
Yep.
I ended up doing that.
Yep. And the whole time, for both of these companies, were these things that you were doing full time, or did you have other, like, you know, contracting work that you were doing,
Yeah, for
or like
both.
both at the same time? Yeah.
Yeah, so after I sold the first one, but even that was a learning experience too, because it's like when I sold that company, I took a cash buyout, and if I would have known a little bit more, I would have definitely done that a little bit differently. Maybe a cash equity split.
Mm-hmm.
The company's still around, but I took a cash payout and was able to pay off some stuff, pay off some debt, um, and I was like, man, that was easy. I can do that again. So I was in my mid to late 20s at the time, late 20s at the time. So, I wasn't ready to be retired. And of course, it was pretty good money, but it wasn't enough to be retired, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was something that I was like, okay, that I can do that again with some other idea.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, to answer your question, I was still doing this stuff on the side. My tool bucket was built on the side, and it was something that I ended up also finding out later on in my career that you know to raise capital, a lot of investors would like for you to be working for this thing full time,
Mm-hmm.
before you even raise capital, or you can get some traction or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to answer your question, I was doing that on the side.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Um, and I'm guessing from just knowing a little bit about the more of your story is that each company that you worked on or each product that you kind of created and had lessons learned and successful exit or just learned a bunch of stuff. It seems like you always kind of taken the one and then use that momentum to kind of move on to the next thing. So what was sort of the next thing that you tackled after, like you said, after learning a bunch of those lessons about um, that last product that you worked on?
Yeah, so the next one after that was called the Fantasy Market. It was a fantasy sports startup company, and at the time, that market was just going crazy. A lot of money was flowing into that industry, and FanDuel and DraftKings, were birthed out of that time period. And this was in around 2014, 15. I ended up creating the fantasy market in 2016. I ended up selling that in 2017, but that was the next startup. And when I created that one, I was a little more equipped for what I was getting into, like what to look for. Um, in the first two companies, I didn't really have any partners. Like I worked with that roofer, but he wasn't an equity partner of the business,
Mm-hmm.
which was also a mistake, right? For me. And the fantasy market was one that I ended up having three other founders to cover some of the pieces that I didn't really want to focus on. I wanted to focus on the technology and building that out. And I had some other individuals, working on marketing and working on basically like the operations, understanding the fantasy market, because you can imagine very legal heavy,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and so I had someone that was on top of that, making sure that we were doing everything in the law, so we didn't have any issues there. Um, and it's one of those things where I learned a lot from that one as well. I did exit that one, and that was my biggest exit. But that was something that I learned a lot because of the different. This was a B2C company. That was my first B2C. The first two were B2B companies, and I realized the importance of marketing and how expensive marketing is. So, all of them were huge learning curves for me. And to kind of help me get to where I am now as an entrepreneur.
All right. So I want to jump ahead just a little tiny bit in your story, and I don't think I'm skipping over anything from your background of like other companies that you had or other jobs or other projects, but granularity was one that I thought would make sense for us to talk about really quickly because that's when we
Yeah.
first met, when we first started to work together. You had this idea for a company well, I'll let you give the background on it. Tell me about kind of where the idea came from and what led you to build it, and then we could talk a little bit about sort of how we work together and how that actually led
Yeah.
us into even the next project too.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I ended up learning is that, you know, you want to build something either, well, I feel, build things where there's a movement or where there's a huge need, right? Or it's like right on the horizon. It's like it's not quite a need, but it will be in a little bit, right? And that's kind of what granularity was. So when I creative granularity, I had, talked to a couple people in marketing, and this GDPR, CCPA regulatory, um, agency, well, the regulations were starting to, not quite, but they were starting to find companies that were using third party data. You had to capture first party data. And I was like, it's not quite there yet, but if you can have some type of platform to help marketers on one side of this platform, um, if you can help them with capturing first party data, then they're within the confines of the regulations, but and then what's going to make people want to give this first party data? And they're not necessarily signing up to some website, they're just watching an ad or they're doing a survey. Like, what's going to entice people to want to do that, right? And money, so in a sense, that's kind of what it was. It was a two-sided platform. And so, and as you can notice with my companies now, I'm starting to step up the complexity of these things, because this was a B2B and a B2C company,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, that's a different approach. You have to find liquidity in those types of marketplace type ideas, right? Where you have enough customers to satisfy the marketers and you have enough marketers to satisfy the customers. And, a lot of marketing dollars going into that.
Mm-hmm.
So, that was right where it's, that was kind of a little bit of a gamble now that I look back. And the reason was because I thought that, the regulatory agencies were going to really start cracking down on the information that companies were collecting from us as we traverse the internet, or when we sign up to companies, things of that nature, and what other companies were sharing with other companies, right? Because a lot of that goes back, goes on, and that's where the third party data comes into play. So it's like, it's one of those deals where I wanted to create something like right before that pain point for the marketing companies started to happen, and that's why I created that platform in the first place. And that's, like you said, that's where we met, because I was like, I need to partner with a marketer here, but I'm not just going to go and talk to somebody and say, hey, you want to partner, So from the sell of my, of the fantasy market, I had a couple bucks to be able to kind of farm out some of this stuff, work with some individuals first, and then say, hey, if this is something that you'd be interested in partnering with, then
Mm-hmm.
let's do it. And that's kind of how you and I ended up meeting, and then ended up partnering on that venture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. We could probably do a whole hour just on the lessons learned and what worked and what didn't, and all the
Yeah,
challenges that come with what you just talked about, like having a two-sided platform. And it's sort of what comes first, the chicken or the egg, and how do you build sort of that type of not a marketplace, but that type of a kind of a two-sided platform, because there's a whole lot of education. And because we were asking consumers to look at their data in a totally different way, through a
different way.
different
Yeah,
lens,
yeah,
and then asking marketers to kind of take some really big steps based on changes that were coming. We didn't know exactly when the hammer was going to drop, and all of it was just kind of fuzzy. The stuff that wasn't really in our control. I think that was right around the time that AI was becoming a little bit mainstream. It's when
yeah,
everybody started talking about it. I don't think OpenAI had done a full launch or release of ChatGPT, but there were rumblings and people were starting to build products using it, and so that was a time that I think we sort of shifted and said, hey, we were like working together, and there might be another product or a business idea that could use AI. Like many people, we were looking to kind of jump on
yeah.
that bandwagon and create a product quickly that solved the problem. And so, kind of tell me about that sort of transition from your side of it.
Yeah, so that was a total pivot, and so many companies have done that, and it wasn't even a pivot in the same industry. It was totally we went totally B2B with that one, right? Um, so what we were doing there was, and this kind of goes into my aha moment when it came to AI. So in November of 22, that when generative AI has been out for a very long time. We've been using it for a very long time, but some people are like, but why is everyone talking about it now all of a sudden? Well, generative AI came out in November 22, and it just totally changed the game, and that was in the form of ChatGPT. So for the first time, there was some type of platform or system where you can provide some input to this model, which a ChatGPT is, and it would generate content that was totally new, like new content. So for instance, like if you were to use Siri or something, that's AI. Siri, Alexa, all those things have been around for a long time. But it was more recognition and command based, meaning like it would recognize some type of trigger word in the form of Siri or Alexa, and then it was programmed to say, if I hear this type of trigger word, to do XYZ, right? Programming involved. Generative AI was more kind of like, it generates something totally new without programming, just total, some just some type of text or some type of digital content, you know, and that totally changed the game. So I was like, we got to get on this. And this is right around the time where we were like, all right, do we kind of fold up granularity? Do we keep going here? Do we try to raise more capital? Like, what do we do here? And yeah, we did a total hard pivot, created Armchair, and it was at the very beginning where I think we were on ChatGPT 3 at the time, and OpenAI was building out their platform still, so it was going down, every once in a while, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, but we were doing, we were getting some pretty good content, and for me, from a technologist, it really helped me with trying to understand this new generative AI, you know, because I had programmed our back end for that, and so that was really the beginning of, and I think what we did that where probably January, February of 23, something like that is when we did the pivot. I can't quite remember.
I think so.
Um, but yeah, kind of a similar, I guess, we were targeting both businesses and, people and potential entrepreneurs, the people who were thinking about becoming an entrepreneur and providing them with some type of content to help them or guide them along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Things that we all wanted or would have liked to have more easily when we were
Yeah.
starting out, right?
Yeah.
So it was a good product. I think it taught us all AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Started we were using it, every day. Taught me how to program with it,
Yep.
which ended up leading to where I'm at now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the quick idea around it was uh, there were all these trends that we saw loud and clear that, more and more people were getting laid off from their jobs. More and more people were starting businesses. More and more people were doing, freelance work, side hustles.
Yeah.
I mean, side hustles have always been a thing, but beyond like, driving Uber and doing things like that, people were, really talking about that kind of flexible work and entrepreneurship in a way that we had never seen before. And so we just said, all right, how do we marry the two? All these trends that are happening, and then AI as a way to kind of be a coach to help you start a business or start
Mm-hmm.
the best side hustle based on your experience and your career, that you've had up to this point. So I think it was it was
Which
a
is
great,
needed now.
yeah, it's a great idea,
It's really needed now.
and I'm sure if we really stuck with it, I mean, we were all doing this on the side. We should say that,
Right.
like
Exactly.
we all
Exactly.
had
Hmm.
full-time jobs or other full-time endeavors. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think for you, it sounds like just that like deep dive into AI and understanding how to use it and how not to use it, because I think we realized quickly how many companies out there, and it's still true today.
Yeah.
And at the time, I think maybe we were a little bit guilty of this too, of it just being ChatGPT, sort of behind the scenes with like this like thin wrapper of like
Exactly.
what your company is.
Yeah.
And while you probably could create something useful and that people would use, to be a long term sustainable, in terms of like a business model, that's not the
Yeah.
best the best product to hang your hat on.
Yeah. And we
And
see what's
so
happening to those companies now, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think that's probably what got you thinking about kind of taking a step back, looking at that lesson learned and looking at kind of what everybody was doing with AI.
Yeah.
And then I know you took a little time off, and um, because you've been an entrepreneur and you've been growing businesses for how many years up to this point, and I think you realized, okay, I got to take a little bit of a step away,
Yeah.
figure out some stuff. And then I think it was around then when you sort of all these things came together, was kind of this idea for Life Summary, right?
Yeah. And the reason I took a step away, because it's, I mean, as you know, it's a grind. It's a grind. And also, I put a lot of my own money into Granularity as well. So not only was it a financial grind, but it was also just a physical grind. Being having to stay up very late, not sleeping well because you're trying to figure out, is this the right approach? Is this going to be the thing? Like, being on, spending countless hours on LinkedIn. I was trying to raise capital. You hear no a lot, and every entrepreneur, knows that, when they're raising capital, of course. But you hear no a lot, and so those types of things, and we worked with Granular for about 3 years. Yeah, because I think we started in like January or February 2020. So it was a grind. I needed a break. I needed a break. I needed to. I wanted to learn a little bit more about AI, because I knew, once again, that's where the world's going. What can I build that ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, they're not going to just build themselves, and just now my company is just worthless. So yeah, but it was good time, and it did allow me to come up with this idea. But the AI space and the AI engineering is very different than just traditional development, traditional engineering. So I had to wrap my head around that, and during that time, I was fortunate enough to have a couple contracts, and do some AI engineering work for some companies, and come up with some ideas, and that's kind of how I fell upon Life Summary. But like I was saying earlier, I think it's a perfect time to kind of build this type of technology, because right now people are just starting to hear about and learn about ChatGPT. How many people are using it? There's a lot of people using it, but how are they using it? Right now, studies are showing that they're mostly using it to search like they use Google. But we both know it's way more powerful than that, way more powerful than that. And it's one of those things where this idea, Life Summary, is not necessarily something that, um, you're hearing people walking around talking about. Oh, I wish I had this thing where from my phone I can just ask my questions about my insurance and my, what's my interest rate. You don't hear many
Hmm.
people asking about that. But at the same token, it's also something that I know from my own life and experience, and from people that have signed up to the wait list, and talking to some of the individuals, that I'm doing focus groups with. It's something, and we've all had these questions. It's just that we never had anything to be able to easily answer this quickly,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So yeah, it's one of those things where I think it's perfect time. People are starting to become a little bit more educated with generative AI, ChatGPT, and being able to now have a solution, or some type of technology to help you understand things.
Mm-hmm.
or provide you with recommendations or even reminders.
Yeah.
I think it's a useful tool.
Mm-hmm.
Is and how I look at this company, is it something that's like a Facebook where you're going to be on it, 5 hours a day? No, it'll be more kind of like a Mint or a Rocket Money, where it's something that you periodically, log into. In the case of those two technologies, you can categorize your finances for the week or for the month, or how
Mm-hmm.
I do mine every Monday. But it's going to be something like that, so where you upload your documents, but that's you don't change your insurance often, right? You don't,
Mm-hmm.
you know you'll have a new bank statement or a new brokerage account statement every month, right? And over time, we want to be able to help individuals automate that ingestion into the system so that they don't even have to log in and upload those documents.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the friction points or hurdles that we're going to have. Trying to help individuals get these documents and get them into the system as easy as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a problem that other companies have had, and they've solved it. We will as well, and
Mm-hmm.
I have some ideas on the approach that we're going to take to do that. But once this is really going, it's going to be very easy for people to hook up their information using connectors, third party, systems, and ingest this information into the system to provide the best understanding and suggestions that the platform can to them. And trust me, they will be useful. And I've already found use in this, personally.
Mm-hmm.
I have my auto insurance, home policy, and brokerage account information. I have my trust and will in here.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was creating one of the AI agents, I come to find out that I was not insured enough based on my assets and brokerage account. You know, if I were to be in an auto accident and get sued, and my liability didn't cover that for the other individual that got hurt in this fictitious accident,
Mm-hmm.
um, then they would be able to sue me personally. And those are all things that maybe I've my advisor told me this, when I got in my insurance 10 years ago
Yeah.
with him,
Yep.
but it's like these are all things that the system will just push you a recommendation that, oh,
Mm-hmm.
by the way, this is the case.
Yeah.
Or you could, bust out your phone and ask the question really quick.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that you're at lunch with someone and something unfortunate happens to them that involves their insurance. You could just take out your phone and ask really quickly just to make sure you're covered in that
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Mm-hmm.
Another example that just happened, I believe, like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was watching the news, and you know, the people that unfortunately lost their homes in Southern California due to the fires. They're having some issues with the loan companies, that they had their mortgages through, and I guess those companies gave them a 90-day period to say, listen, you don't have to pay us for the 90 days. Um, you know, uh, like a deferment period. And
Mm-hmm.
in the fine print of that agreement, what it said is on that 91st day, you have to pay back everything that you didn't pay for the last 3 months. And a lot of people didn't know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if that agreement was uploaded in the life summary, you would have been recommended or notified, or you could have just simply asked questions about that specific document to better
Mm-hmm.
understand it. So you didn't have to go through and read that entire agreement, right?
Yeah.
You can get a summary of that type of thing. And those types of things, to me, would be very useful. Especially that use case,
Mm-hmm.
because that use case right there is why I saw it on the news, because a lot of people didn't have the money to pay back all at once, and
Yeah.
some of their homes were going into, they were starting the foreclosure process,
Mm-hmm.
you know because they didn't have the money to pay back because they're now late on their loan. But these
Yeah.
are all things that were there, but we just didn't know and who reads this stuff, right? We
Yeah.
should,
Yeah.
but we all have jobs and kids, and we have enough problems, especially now, with how things are going today, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
being able to have a system that can understand that type of use case in your life and help you out,
Yeah.
to me, is beneficial,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a system that, as of today, we would be a first mover. We have some soft competitors. I haven't been able to see anyone that's doing this exactly, and our solution is also something that can be used on the business side, in the form of assisting insurance agencies,
Mm-hmm.
assisting financial advisors.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all things that I think we can do to help both businesses and consumers. But we are going to we're going to launch on the consumer side first, and in parallel, I have a team that's going to go after some businesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. When you first came to me with the idea, it's really funny. The timing of it was because that was around the time that I was also pivoting. So my marketing, like consulting practice, um, for the last, 6 whatever years, like I've worked with companies kind of across different industries and, more startup companies, more established companies, really like kind of across the board. Selfishly, I love the variety.
Hmm.
But it was about that time that you reached out that I had just sort of decided to go all in on FamTech,
Hmm.
which is kind of a large umbrella. A lot of companies fit underneath that umbrella, but it's basically any companies that are built to help families thrive, like in some way. And even though tech is in the name, it doesn't necessarily have to be tech. So that was when you reached out, was right around that time, and the light bulb kind of went off in my head of just how much, maybe not directly, but indirectly, that almost feels like a FamTech tool because of how important it is. Like if you are starting a family or much later in life, and you're dealing with parents who are aging, or wills and trusts and stuff that are designed to kind of keep a family safe and protected and prepared, and all of those things can get kind of complicated once you
Hmm.
start having kids, or once time goes on and you sort of don't think about a policy, or you don't think about something that you have in place. And like the really funny example was, I think I told you this, that we were doing something with our financial advisor, and we get this email. It's like, hey, E- Everett, our second born, he's not listed in any of your like wills or anything like that. Do you
Yeah,
want to add him? And
you forget.
we're like,
Yeah.
oh, of course we want to add him, but that
Yeah.
was just like, the second kid comes, and
Yeah.
you lose track of
Mhm.
stuff, and so I imagine that's where the like that's one very small example, but like that's probably where a sort of a proactive, almost feels like like a family assistant, to
Yeah.
like review all of your documents, and then when stuff like that pops up that you're not seeing because there's no trigger for you to
Right.
be in there and notice it, but if it's built to kind of always look for those things, I'm
Right.
guessing that's probably an example where it would just kind of proactively, kind of like
Yeah.
that financial advisor did, but maybe even earlier, be like, hey, by the way, you probably want to add your son to your will.
Yeah.
And I can imagine tons of other examples like that. I think we talked a while ago, and the long list of just use cases that you would never really think of, but that's kind of the point, right?
Right.
You don't think of it, and that's
Right.
kind of in a
But
proactive way.
they're very important things,
Yeah.
right? They're very important things, and you're exactly right. Like a family agent. You know, um, so it's you're fortunate enough to be able to have a financial advisor. I have I know a lot of people that just they just don't have that luxury, and they can be pretty expensive
Hmm.
depending on the what your advisors, and when it comes to insurance agents, I mean, the good ones will reach out to you every once in a while, but if you're unfortunate and you have an agent that gave you your insurance and you haven't spoken to them for 5 years,
Hmm.
and the onus is on you to reach out and say, hey, I gotta, you know, I just did this I just got a renovation on my new house. Should I change anything on my home policy? People might not think of those things. A lot of people don't know that their jewelry is insured, or well, could be insured on your home policy,
Mm-hmm.
right? They don't know that. So if you're on vacation with your family and your ring comes out, your diamond comes out of the base, and you lose it,
Mm-hmm.
people don't know that can possibly be covered
Yeah.
on their insurance, on their homeowner's insurance. I mean, you can get separate jewelry insurance too, but
Mm-hmm.
people don't know these things, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't know to ask your agent, and your agent never tells you, then how can you figure this out, right?
Yeah.
This system is going to assist people with those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
and, and that's one of the things that I think is, to me, is the most important feature of the system. And I'm really going to put a lot of work and thought into that feature, because great, being able to take out your phone and ask a question about your own documents, that's useful,
Mm-hmm.
because there have been plenty of times in my own life where I couldn't remember something that was in documents at home, you
Mm-hmm.
know but it would have been nice to be able to just ask my phone and then I have it, right?
Yeah.
That's useful. But to me, what's more useful is some type of system that can understand your life through your documents,
Yep.
and then make recommendations or suggestions on how to help you save money,
Mm-hmm.
or in this case, let you know that, hey, did you know that diamond, and your ring is covered by your
Yeah.
home
Yep.
owner's policy, right? Just things like that.
Yeah. It's so funny as you're talking about this. I even think of other somewhat recent examples, like the house that we bought a few years ago. We had because of how much we put down, we were paying like PMI, like a monthly the mortgage insurance.
Hmm.
And I guess we kind of learned that that is set to kind of like you pay that for kind of a set amount of time, but there's a whole bunch of factors that could allow you to like get out of paying that much earlier. And we
Hmm.
just didn't know that. And it has to do with like the value of the house and if you're paying off stuff early and a whole bunch of stuff. So, and we just randomly, my wife and I just kind of randomly like looked into it and like, oh, wow, we don't need to be paying that right now. And so we, with a phone call and a quick thing with a realtor, got out of paying PMI for I don't even know how many months we were scheduled to be paying it for.
Right.
But that had there been something to kind of more proactively tell us, months earlier or even whenever it was, like, that comes out to like thousands of dollars that we
Right.
would have saved. So my brain immediately goes to a bunch of different examples like that, and that's not necessarily fam tech, but it kind of is just because of family, financial tools and trackers and have whatever the goals are you have for yourself or as a couple or as a family. Like
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that I could totally see how it would align with that. Um,
Yeah, and it does fall under that category, because if you think about it, right, if something were to happen to you, would Laura know where all your stuff is, right?
hmm
So, the idea for this would be to have a system where your family could log into, everyone can chat with the data, but it's a centralized repository for this information,
hmm
to alleviate the need to search through everything, and that's like we had to do, my sister and I had to do when my mom passed away, right?
hmm
It was very difficult to find all this stuff. It was all over the place, and this kind of organizes it a little bit more, but then also provides access, and also clarity, because when we're in relationships, you might be better at the finances, she might be better at the insurance stuff, and it's like, Laura has that, you have the brokerage account stuff, and but now it's a way of Laura being able to understand what you are focusing on in your relationship, right?
Yeah.
And vice versa, by just simply chatting with this information, if the need ever arose.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. And I've actually talked with a couple other companies that are more building financial tools, but that's a big thing that they are trying to incorporate are multiple kind of user accounts, but like not just because you want them separate, but because you want the tool to actually like engage with that user in a different way. So like
Yeah.
if it knows user one is like, a little bit more on top of things, or a little bit more anxious about money, or a little bit more into tracking every week, and then the other user just wants to know, I need the high level summary, I need the cliff notes, like that it can learn how to provide the information to those different users. So I could kind of see that being something that would happen, maybe not automatically, but if it's
Mhm.
learning what the goals are and how the users like use the tool,
Right.
it could probably customize it a little bit based on that. Which actually is my
Mhm.
segue to my next question. Um, how the actual mechanics of like how the tool works, either today or if you have the sort of ideal state of what you're building. Um, kind of explain that a little bit of just how it works. Obviously, you have to give it access to the right stuff
Mhm.
first, right, for it to
Yeah,
be able to
for sure.
work. So how do you kind of do that, and then what do you foresee being the sort of role of the user in just providing it all of the right access? How do you see that working?
Yeah, so right now, I mean, the system's in a private beta. So what we're doing is really testing the logic for this. And from a technological standpoint, where this system shines is it draws relationships between your documents. It's not just a simple chat with your document type of system. You can upload a file to Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive and chat with it. That's out there already.
Hmm.
But this system right here is purpose built, one, but two, it draws relationships between the documents to give you more and better insight into your information. But how it works from a usability standpoint, at the moment, we're going to try to alleviate some of these friction points as best we can. But at the moment, you would need to have your documents digitized on a laptop or something and
Hmm.
upload this information into the system. Over time, we want to build as many connectors as we possibly can to allow individuals to more easily ingest this data into the system
Hmm.
so that they don't have to turn stuff into PDF format or Word format. The good thing is most of our documents nowadays, they are PDF'd and sent somewhere, or if we log into our bank, or we log into our insurance carrier, all that stuff's in PDF format at the moment.
Hmm.
But there may be, if you go and get a new mortgage loan, or you buy a new house or something, all of that data is usually in PDF format nowadays. But there
Hmm.
may be some things that were never PDF. So, those are the types of things that we have to figure out, as we go, just to help individuals more easily ingest this data into the system. But like I said, the great thing about it is, this isn't something that you have to do 2 hours a day.
Hmm.
You can sit down on a Saturday, you get all your documents in, and then you'll be able to benefit from the insight that you'll be able to get from that. So it's really like a one-time, one weekend thing, and it's in there because these documents don't change often, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, right now, uh, uh, you upload your data into the system, and then you can chat. There'll be a chat option to where you can ask any question about the data that's in the system. But then there will also be a recommendation piece where we just send you suggestions or recommendations based off of what we found in your data that you might not know about.
Hmm.
So all that legalese and fine print that's in your insurance documents, if you're bored one day, you can just sit there and talk to it, and it'll come back with a response, and then you could ask another question right off of that response. So that's what I was saying. If you think of it, it's very similar to ChatGPT, but it's for your documents, right? ChatGPT, it's trained on a whole bunch of public information. So if
Hmm.
I went and asked about George Washington or the Arizona Cardinals, I can, anything that's public, I can get that information and
Mm-hmm.
have a conversation with ChatGPT about it. But from a standpoint of your information, some people actually are uploading their W-2s, and
Mm-hmm.
they're uploading their documents into ChatGPT. But ChatGPT is also not purpose built. It's not going to provide you with the suggestions like our system will do. It's not going to draw that relationship between the documents like our system will. So you're going to get more better and richer insight from our platform.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but at the same token, ChatGPT may or may not, depending on your settings, use the data to train its models that you just uploaded in the
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT. Our
Yeah.
system won't do that, right?
Yeah.
We'll be very and are being very security conscious, because that's another major friction point for our platform. You know, we're basically having individuals take their life information and centralize it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, we're working with a company right now called Drata to become SOC 2 compliant. And basically, by becoming SOC 2 compliant, they're going to try to penetrate the system as much as possible, tell us where openings are,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll have to do what we need to do to secure those areas of the platform, to keep it as secure as we possibly can as part of the compliance process. Many businesses have that
Mm-hmm.
deal with the type of information that we'll be dealing with. So those are all things that we're working on at the moment, which is another reason why we're in private beta. We're actually working on becoming SOC 2 compliant. And then once that's complete, that's when I will talk to my partners, and then we'll figure out, is it time to really kick the tires and let this thing go?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have enough information? We like I said, we do have a business, a B2B presence as well, where we license out our platform to companies. We're in talks with two major companies at the moment, and I don't really know. I probably can say the names, but I just won't, just to be cautious. But they're
Mm-hmm.
pretty big companies that are very interested in our platform. So the platform, from a technological standpoint, was built as a standalone API to where we can use it on our consumer side, which we plan to do, but then also businesses can use it for their use cases.
Mm-hmm.
And these, two of the companies are in the family security space,
Mm-hmm.
and then we have a financial advisory company that's interested in this, and then we also have a mid-sized insurance company that's interested in the platform on the back end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, it feels like, and you talked about this at the very beginning of our conversation, the reality that a lot of the people that we like know and that we work with, and that like people who are in similar roles as us might be using AI quite a bit more than like the average person. So
Yeah.
I'm guessing if you take a step outside of that bubble, and it's a pretty large bubble, but if you take a step outside of that and look at sort of the average person, the average consumer, I'm guessing that's maybe where you're probably most excited about kind of looking forward towards where the business can go and how it can grow and how it can start reaching people. I'm guessing just based on that, that would be kind of the thing that you're most excited about kind of exploring and tapping into a little bit, just because a lot of people aren't spending a lot of time, engineering,
Using, yeah,
engineering ChatGPT and how they can use it to help make their lives better,
exactly,
right?
right, exactly.
So anything else that that I've missed that we haven't talked about that you're either excited about or want to talk about, or anything that maybe we didn't cover off on?
Yeah, I mean, so of course I'm excited about this startup, but I'm just excited about AI in general. Where this is going. Yeah, there are a lot of negative aspects of any type of technology that's going to move us forward, right? Similar to what the internet did. This is just as big, probably bigger. A lot of people say it's bigger than the internet even. We all know some of the downfalls and the harm that the internet has provided us all with, right? But at the same token, it has done a lot of really good. And, you know, anything that people make, you're going to have that, right? When people talk about, trust in other individuals, I always use like Uber as an example. Like I think it was 2000, yeah, last year, 2024, they had like 3.4 billion rides throughout the world. And there were about roughly 85,000 incidents the things that happen where most people are afraid, oh, I don't know, what if somebody does this and does that? Yeah, it's possible. Of course, it's possible, but we're talking about less than 1% out of 3.4 something like that billion rides, 80,000 incidents, like major incidents, right? So by nature, people are good by nature, and that
Mm-hmm.
proves it. By nature, people are good. We get in the car with people that we have no idea who they are, but chances are things are going to happen, like because by nature, most people are good people. But you will have those individuals that use this type of technology and do something with it that's not, all the things that we're afraid of. So I guess in a long-winded way of saying, I'm excited about AI because I'm thinking of it from an optimistic view. This is going to do a lot of great things for individuals, for people, for mankind as a whole. Because one, just like the Uber example, most people are good, so they're going to use this technology for good. Sure, you're going to have some people, and it's already starting, that are using it for bad. But overall, I think it's something that's going to be very useful to mankind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is it now? The next question I get is it going to displace jobs? Yes, it will. It will. There's no doubt about it. It definitely will. And I like to use the example of Ford. When Ford created the car, there was a whole horse and carriage and flourishing industry around the wheels and the carriage and what type of horse straps, and there was a whole flourishing industry around that. And then he comes out with the Model T, and just kind of by the wayside, all that stuff is just, because who would rather not have a car if they could afford it, and or have a
Mm-hmm.
buggy, right? So, you know, basically what ended up happening over time was all the individuals who were flourishing in the horse and carriage industry, they had to be retrained or reskilled to do something in this car industry now.
Mm-hmm.
And that car industry created a whole bunch of new jobs that didn't exist before. Like you didn't need stoplights before. Well, now you do. You didn't need an engine mechanic before, right? Well, now
Mm-hmm.
you do. You didn't need things that go inside the car before. Well, now you do, right? So that created new jobs. And I think
Mm-hmm.
AI will be the same. So we're going to be in a period where, yeah, a lot of people are going to be displaced by AI, but I think AI is going to create a lot of different types of jobs that use the technology that we just need to learn. And over time, this has been the case with any type of technology where by leaps and bounds, it moves man forward. And I think AI will be the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we could probably spend an entire hour and a half talking about just those two topics. In fact, we probably have over the past year or two that sat
Yeah,
down and unpacked some of
yeah,
that
for
stuff,
sure.
and so we might need to schedule another call to do that because I find it to be so interesting, kind of the role of AI, and again, kind of like trying to look outside the bubble of just what I'm doing and how I'm using it.
Mhm.
Um, and seeing kind of how the average person's life could be better because of it. And so that's why I love having these calls because it's pretty eye opening when you sit down and chat with people who are trying to do that. And I have had enough of these conversations where I just said, hey, you know what? It's probably makes sense to record these and share them out. So looking forward to doing that with your story. Obviously, I know your story. We've known each other for a while, but getting
Yeah.
to sit and chat for a little bit and talk about this has been great. And let's do it again soon. Maybe I'll get down to Scottsdale when it's not 115 degrees.
Yeah.
But let's keep the conversation going because I want to stay on top of what you're building, what you're working on, and Yeah, I'm always here to help.
Yeah, and thank you very much for the time, Dan. And once again, I really appreciate it, man.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'll let you go, but let's definitely talk soon.
All right, have a good one.
All right, bye bye.